I've had a really bad cold for about a week and a half, so up until recently I wasn't able to really listen to these, which is why this comparison has been taking such a long time. I'm back in the saddle. I have a lot to say about this, but there are some elements that, just like you, are unplanned. This is the Abyss Diana MR, and this is the Meze Empyrean 2. These are both priced at a beehole clenching $3,000 a piece, not including accessories. They're both very, very nice. I think these represent some of the best headphones at any price, to be honest. I think that they beat a lot of higher end competition, and I think that both of these are in contention for the best headphone at any price. What's funny about these two headphones is that they both achieve the same goal of being incredibly good while being very good at different things. And it's funny how much one headphone will fill the gaps of the other one and vice versa. They really do go back and forth. This comparison is way more competitive than I think a lot of people realize. Surprisingly, these both have very similar weights and they're both very, very comfortable, but in two different ways. The Meze has a very big profile, but I promise it's not as heavy as it looks. It's very good at kind of hugging all the way around your head, and it feels just kind of like a warm, comfortable, snuggly hug. That's kind of how I describe the comfort of this. If you remove the ear pads, you can really see just how slim the Diana's build is, all the way around too. Now, because of this, they've got this build that I think is going to really, really work for some people and not work that well for others. I'm one of those people where it doesn't work super well for me. Personally, I have to have this extra ear cushion, which I'd prefer not to use, but the comfort benefits for me are just substantial. I'm also using for this entire comparison the vegan pads, not only because they sound a little bit better in my opinion than the stock ones towards my preference, but it's also the most comfortable version of this. So this is a much more slim, streamlined headphone. I'd honestly say that with the upgrades, I do find the MR to be a little bit more comfortable than the Empyrean. The build philosophies don't end there though. The cable for the Empyrean is this kind of braided, slightly heavier cable. This one feels lighter. The Diana's is stiffer from the split down, but from the split up is just incredibly thin, malleable, and light. I go back and forth on which one I like more. They're both really exceptional. I had both of these finished in 4.4 millimeter, and I've been using a number of different amplifiers on this. Let me talk about those really quick. Now, I listened to a total of 4 different amps on this mostly. One was going to be the WA23 Luna, which is a upcoming review, a very high-end amplifier, very high-end tube amplifier, costs almost $10,000. It's ridiculous. 2 were my kind of reference amplifiers, a little bit more on the middle range for price. One was the A70 Pro and D70 Pro stack. The other one was the WA7 for a tube amplifier. And the last amplifier that I tried on this is an upcoming review also, which is the XD05 Pro from X-Duo. This is a mobile DAC amp that has some very cool characteristics. I think you should really be pumped about the review of this because this thing is, it's fucking sick, dude. Like, straight up, it's sick. It's so good. Not only does it have some cool characteristics, like you can actually swap the DAC in it, but it just sounds so good and has so much power. It's awesome. I will say that Meze has done a good job. I think this is a little bit more efficient, and consider this a good thing or a bad thing, it's less transparent for the rest of your gear. So I notice less of a difference going from low-end amps to high-end amps on this headphone as I do with the Diana MR. Depending on your preference on what you like to do, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. Good if you like it to sound really good off of not a lot of high-end stuff, or bad if you like to change gear a lot and hear your different gear sound characteristics. Now, I don't want to go too deep into these for time's sake, but a couple small things I do want to mention here. One is going to be the warranty difference. Abyss is very confident. They have a 10-year industry-leading warranty. In my opinion, this should be the standard for a headphone that costs $3,000. But quite frankly, Abyss is one of the only companies that does it. They're very confident in their products, and I am too. The Meze has a 2-year warranty. Win for the Abyss. The carry cases are very different. The Meze is a lot less portable than the Abyss is, though it is a little bit nicer. It also comes with an extra set of pads. I do wish the Abyss would come with an extra set of pads, especially since their replacement pads or alternatives are very expensive. This is a slightly more nuanced conversation than that though, because in my opinion, even though the Meze comes with a spare set of pads, which are a different type, they really don't sound as good. I don't really recommend using them. They do not feel like a viable alternative to the stock pads, which are exceptional on the Empyrean 2. They seem like, no offense to Meze, I think they made a great headphone here, but they seem like a bit of an afterthought for sound quality compared to the stock pads. Stock pads are great. Now the Diana, on the other hand, ships with these. These are the stock pads, these black ones are the vegans. And the thing with these two pads is that even though you have to buy them separately, they're both very, very, very good. And so you can swap and get 2 different sound signatures, but both versions of the sound signatures are exceptional, unlike the Empyrean 2. So again, a little bit of nuance here in this conversation. Another thing is tangibility. This is something that I can't get across on video, no matter how hard I try. The Dianas feel incredibly dense and incredibly solid in a way that most other headphones, including the Empyrean, does not. Physically, just a lot tougher. Like if you had to use it as a weapon, you probably could. I feel like if I dropped the Meze, I don't know that it would, but I feel like it would break. The Meze feels well built and luxurious, but definitely not tough. Okay, when it comes to sound quality, this is where things get just so freaking difficult, okay? I do want to start this by qualifying it with a couple of statements though. One, this review I think is a lot more fun if I use the vegan base ported pads. I think that makes the sound signatures closer together, but that makes the differences between them, in my opinion, a lot more interesting. The stock pads are very, very good, very technical, great. I just prefer the slightly kind of warmer sound of the vegan pads. So all the sound comparisons are with the vegan base ported pads from Abyss. The second is that to criticize any of these headphones is not an insult. They are both incredible headphones. I have to actually look for problems with these headphones. A lot of the shortcomings are not obvious unless they're directly compared head to head with each other. So any issues that I bring up should not be seen as a poor overall experience either. Third thing, to better distinguish what I mean between some of these differences, I'm going to be bringing up a couple songs in this. I'd highly recommend checking those songs out after the video. Make sure you get through it so it's all contextual and makes sense. For sound quality, this brings me back to a very old analogy for headphones, but it's probably more true than ever with these two. There is a very old comparison between really highly technical televisions, very big televisions, 85 inches, that's like super color accurate, great contrast, excellent dynamic range, all the bells and whistles in terms of color and picture reproduction, versus going to a theater and watching on a theater screen. Theater screens and projectors are far less technically proficient than their TV counterparts. However, there's a performance to it. Here we have TV and theater. Let's start with an area that in my opinion is the least competitive, which is the treble response. I think that this is a clear win for the Diana MR. Not only is the tuning a little bit better on this, but I also think that things like timbre capability, overall detail retrieval, and even the tuning is just ahead of the Empyrean 2. Now, I love the Empyrean 2's tuning. I actually think it's done very, very well. There is a small, tiny little peak in about 6K that has been troubling some users. I'm seeing some comments. I want to bring that up, make sure everybody's clear that it does have a tiny bit of a treble peak there. It's definitely not bad though. I think it's like very well within the limits of what's reasonable for a headphone that's this good in so many other areas. Now, even though the tuning on this is exceptional, the overall detail retrieval is not the absolute best on the planet. It's a very detailed headphone, don't get me wrong. Compared to, a $1,000 headphone, it's much more detailed usually. However, the comparisons, like things like the MR, other headphones out there are a lot more detailed headphones than this. However, personally, I would pick good tuning over outright detail any day. But that's where the MR steps a little bit ahead, is that it does have outright detail, but it also has really good tuning. And that means as far as technicals go, I think that the MR is the clear winner here. However, there's this analogy that keeps coming up. So I want to point out a song. I want to point out the song Cornfield Chase by Hans Zimmer. The organ and the strings and every instrument in that song just seems so detailed for the Diana. It just comes across with this incredibly vivid picture of every instrument. You can hear the separation between them. It's all very clear. Every instrument just has its own texture, its own timbre capability, its vibrancy. It's awesome. Woodwinds sound like woodwinds. The organ sounds amazing. The strings sound like strings. But the Empyrean sells the scale of the song more. The size of the song gets a little bit lost in the Diana. It doesn't seem as big and as vast as it does on the Empyrean. The Empyrean just kind of sells you that picture of a very large recording a little bit better than the MR does. The Diana overall has, in my opinion, more sound fidelity. The voices, the instruments, everything about detail reproduction, the Diana is a little bit better at. The tuning of the treble response also makes sure that while everything is very detailed, nothing is too bright, nothing is too dark. It just sounds very complete throughout the top end of sound, which is great here. But the Empyrean seems to be better overall at showing you the environment. On the Empyrean, big tracks seem bigger, far recordings seem farther, and closer seems closer, etc. Now mid-range. I want to bring up a song, Scars from Sam Smith. Holy shit, do the vocals pop in the Diana MR. This kind of fills up the entire kind of back of your face, if that makes any sense, with the vocalist. It seems extremely lush, extremely fulfilled, and on vocal-based music, I get that type of performance all the time out of the MR. The mid-range is exceptional. Because the Empyrean, though, has a little bit of dip in some of the mid-range in areas that the Diana does not, vocals just seem a little bit smaller. And with that specific song, Scars by Sam Smith, it seems a little bit less full, a little bit less fulfilled, a little bit less real. But because of the delivery of the sound staging and the background instruments in that environment, it's very good at showing you more of the background sounds, not only having more space between you and the vocalist, but also in a weird way being a little bit more forward and a little bit more kind of part of what you're listening to. You notice the background instruments more, whereas you notice them less on the MR. But you notice that voice more on the MR. I'd say as far as technicality, both the treble and the mid-range goes to the Diana. But as far as how it sounds performatively, that's a toss-up of preference. And honestly, for certain songs, the Empyrean 2 just blows the MR out of the water. And for certain songs, the MR blows the Empyrean out of the water. Okay, bass. This is one of the most fun comparative aspects between these two because they are very, very different. The MR is focused again on fidelity. It's so clean throughout the bass response. And even on the stock pads that are not bass ported, the sub bass is just super flat with the mid bass and the lower mid range. With the bass port, of course, it enhances that sub bass a little bit, to the point where the sub bass response is actually, in my opinion, quite a bit better than the Empyrean 2 is. However, the Empyrean 2's mid bass is a little bit better than that of the MR, I think. When it comes to the power of the bass, it really just depends on how it's recorded. Certain songs that have a lot of mid bass impact, things like kick drums, a lot of drum recordings have a lot of mid bass impact. They don't quite hit super low in the ultra sub bass regions. They have so much initial thump and power behind them that they just really fill your head with a very impactful experience. This happens a lot in rock, rap, hip hop, R&B. A lot of modern music kind of hits these notes really often, and it sounds very pleasing on this. It also has a little bit of an overall bass shelf from about 50 hertz up until about, I think it's 300 hertz if I'm remembering correctly. That 300 hertz is getting into that lower mid-range section. And if I had one complaint about the bass, it's that the lower mid-range and the mid-bass, they do seem to blend together a little bit, and they don't quite separate and isolate from each other quite as well as I would like, or quite as well as the MR. Now the MR is cleaner through the mid-bass. It doesn't have any mid-bass blow. It doesn't seem sloppy at all, but it's not as strong, it's not as impactful for those instruments that we talked about before, at least comparatively. However, when it gets to really deep notes, think anything like artificial that's like really low 20, 30, 40 hertz region, anything that is a large scale recording for somebody like Hans Zimmer, where they have these ultra massive instruments, ultra massive like orchestral performances that can really hit those low notes, I do think that the MR performs a little bit better here. So sub bass goes to the MR, mid bass goes to the Empyrean 2. Okay, sound staging. The Empyrean 2 is the winner here. I think the imaging capability for both is about equivalent, but the Empyrean has more space to work with, though it's not actually a perfect sound staging headphone. It's very kind of tubular in its approach. It's a lot to the sides, a little bit out in front, though it's not nearly as dynamic for soundstage like something like an Aria Organic, which can seem as far, if not wider on the sides, but also hit you with a lot of depth and a lot of overall scale. Now, the comparison between those two headphones might be a separate video at some point, but I think the Empyrean 2's overall tuning, sound characteristics, and technicality are superior compared to the Aria Organic, though it is literally twice the cost. So there's that. Okay, an overall winner for me is, it's impossible to pick here. They are both so good. It's really coming down to performance versus technicality here, I think. If you like technicality, the MR is a clear winner. If you like more of a performance with your music, I think the Empyrean is the clear winner. They're both so good. Today was a very hard day at work. All right, that's gonna be it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.